Hi, my name is Cassidy, and today my group members and I are going to discuss with you the importance of a mock interview workshop and why you'll be participating in one today. So, being in high school, you don't think too much about the time you'll spend in an interview. You probably think you won't need to be interviewed until you apply for an adult job. However, you'll be getting interviewed long before your first job after graduation. During this workshop, you will learn how the interview process works and how to answer the questions interviewers will ask you. Being college students, we've all had to participate in an interview and have taken a lot of information from those experiences that we're going to share with you today. This workshop will prepare you for the interview process and teach you how to act in an interview regardless of what it's for. You will learn when you'll be interviewed, how to prepare for your interview depending on the context of it, and how to properly behave and act during the initial interview process. All of you are probably wondering why you need to participate in a mock interview workshop. You're in high school, you shouldn't have to worry about interviews yet. That's not necessarily true. The purpose of this workshop is to prepare you for the interviews you will have to do in certain situations, either before or during your college career. Scholarship interviews are one of those instances. Scholarship interviews are more common than you probably think. That interview will take place even before you graduate high school, depending on when you apply and if you apply for a scholarship. Some scholarships will want to interview you to see why you'd benefit from their scholarship. They'll ask you about yourself, what activities you're involved in, and maybe even have you explain why you should get the scholarship. This interview will mostly be before you start your first semester at college. It'll be your first experience in the interview setting that is more professional than a high school job interview. Further in your college career, you could potentially be interviewed for internships. According to the National Association of Colleges and Employers, 75% of post-secondary students graduate with at least one internship under their belt. That means it's very common for college students to apply for internships. It gains you that job experience, which means you will have to be interviewed in order to gain that internship. Internship interviews are different than scholarship interviews because this could potentially lead to employment opportunities, which means being the most professional you can be is the key. If you want to be a big time sports agent, you'll want to apply for an internship with an agency. Before you even get your foot in the door, you'll have to do the first interview with at least one employee. It can even be common to do more than one interview with different people in the company. You're building those networks, and it's possible that if you don't get the internship, those networks can help you, can like recommend you to other internships and maybe even write you a letter of recommendation if you ask for it. And now my group member Island is going to discuss the importance of preparing properly for an interview.
So after you know why you need to enjoy an interview workshop, now you need to know how to prepare for an interview. Before an interview, you need to improve yourself. The first thing you need to do is to finish your professional and perfect resume because it will affect your first impression. Of course, for the high school student, most of the time, informal interview only need a high quality self introduction. And then you need to improve your interview skill and think where you can best show your ability and how to show it. Just like what has said, maybe you answer some question about yourself on your scholarship interview, just like why you think you should get this scholarship or what would you do after you get this. Your answer and this process is one of ways to show your ability. Before the interview, you need to find some information, find some details about your company and your interviewer, and to know your company's professional field and your interview's major. This is also a good idea to find some news or active about them. And this is a good choice to make a question list because all of these things can show how much you value about this job. In the other way, you need to plan your trip. Just like you need to make sure how you go to that place and how much time it will take, or they have any parking lot? Some question about this, because this is very important to the high school student who without class. And then you need to build your confidence on your daily life. Confidence is a very important thing. It will help you to do the best on your interview or in your workplace. And it will also help you to make a good communication with your leader, your partner, and your classmates. And then if you need to build your confidence, you need to focus on yourself. You need to make sure what you are good at and what you are not good at. These very important things to spend a lot of time on yourself. And then you also need to focus on the last day before an interview. You need to keep your body at the best, and you should ready the formal clothes, and then get enough sleep. Oh, and after you wake up before the interview, you need to eat a healthy breakfast or lunch to make sure you don't feel sick because you missed them. Thank you very much.
Now that we've learned about what to do to get ready for an interview, let's talk about what to do once you actually get into the interview setting. For starters, interviews have a lot more to them than just effectively answering questions. In order to be successful in your interviews, you need to learn how to act professionally, how to effectively answer questions, and finally, what kinds of questions you should ask your interviewer throughout or at the end of the interview. To kick things off, let's talk about how to behave professionally. The first big thing that you need to worry about here going into an interview is the clothes that you have on. Make sure that you either research or ask what type of attire is appropriate for the interview you're going into. And if you're unsure of what to wear, it's always better to overdress than to underdress. Also, of course, make sure that your hair is done in a professional way, and bonus points if you want to put on cologne or perfume to make yourself feel more confident and comfortable going into the interview. Just make sure that you don't overdo it here. Now that we've talked about professionalism going into an interview, let's talk about professionalism while actually the interview setting. One thing that you should have on your mind while in an interview is how you're talking. Make sure that you're using professional but easy to understand language and mannerisms. Use language that'll make you stand out to your interviewer, or just talk in a way that builds intrigue so your interviewer wants to keep listening to the things that you have to say. This will come very easily if you're confident and prepared for your interview. The last thing to think about here is how you actually conduct yourself in the interview. The nonverbals you push are just as important as the things that you say aloud. One big cliche thing that actually is very effective is just to be yourself. Don't put on a face to seem more qualified. You're going to be much more memorable to interviewers if you don't act like every single other person that they interview. On a different note though, it's also important to keep it professional. To do this non-verbally is to conduct yourself in a confident but relaxed way while interviewing. This does two very important things. One, it makes you feel more comfortable because your nonverbals actually affect how you genuinely feel. And two, it makes your interviewer know that you're confident in this setting, which shows a lot of preparedness on your part. The next most important thing when it comes to interviewing is answering the actual questions that they give you effectively. An effective answer to an interview question is an answer that shows the interviewer that you're the best possible candidate for what is being offered. There are a few different things you can do, aside from general preparedness and practice, that can greatly improve how you answer interview questions. The first thing you can do to improve question answering is to answer questions in a way that sells yourself while also sounding interesting, stand out, and a great fit for the thing that you're interviewing for. The best way to get better at this is, of course, to practice and to be prepared for common interview questions. A quick Google search here, and you'll be able to find a list of some of the most common interview questions. From here, though, it's best to have your own take on answering this kind of question so you don't sound exactly like every other candidate for the position you're interviewing for. Another big thing you can do to improve question answering is just to keep it concise. Generally, interview answers should be no longer than 60 seconds. However, answers can also be too short. A good range to shoot for most questions is 45 to 60 seconds. It's good to spend more time answering questions you're really prepared for, or questions that allow you to show off your personal experience or skills, than questions that don't really give you the opportunity to sell yourself. Finally, it's good to focus on some of your nonverbals when being asked and answering questions. Eye contact, for example, is one of the best things that you can keep, and that will express the interest for the thing that you're actually interviewing for. The last thing to focus on to perform effectively in an interview is to have some constructive questions that you plan on asking the interviewer. This is the single most effective thing that you can do to express interest while also gaining a little bit more knowledge about the thing yourself. It is important to ask questions that show interest and allow you to dig a little bit deeper on what you are really interviewing for. It can be good to prepare some questions prior to interviewing, but it's also very beneficial to ask questions that you genuinely have after speaking to the interviewer. Do your own research here. Figure out what aspects of the organization greatly interest you, like the culture, for example, and ask questions to further explore that part of the interview. Now, if you put all these things together, you'll be much more prepared to answer questions and act professionally in a real interview setting. Remember that doing research on the thing, company, or role that you're interviewing for is the best way to get better footing for the kinds of things you'll be asked in the interview. Just a little bit of research here can make or break if you actually get the thing that you're interviewing for. Now Rai is going to wrap everything up and leave us with some closing statements. Thank you.
On the top, talk about why you are learning and where an interview will take place, preparation, and how to behave and act during interviews. In the first part, you can know the knowledge about interviewing and different places in interviews. And then we talk about how you can do before interviews, and the final part, you can learn how to perform properly in interview. First, behind the resume correspond to the individual abilities, and behind the interview correspond to the individual's preparation for the job research goals. Passing a few general questions from the interviewees or getting the interviewee's favor can only show that you have no problem at the level of general abilities and quality. But it does not mean that you are successfully in the interview, and does not mean that you will follow the simulation in the future. The interview question can be clear after preparation. Second, preparation for the interview is more important than passing the interview. Since it is more interview, the result is not the most important things. And the process preparing for the interview. Research on the industry, go to the official website of the corresponding company and investigate the position. These questions are the biggest benefit of interviews. That is, the preparation process of interviews is the essence of more interview. But now, many students are for the purpose of winning the interview prize, or the interviewees work hard for the approval, but forget the original intention of the mock interview. Finally, it is an exercise in thinking about the position of human resources and department manager in the empathy. It is not important to answer a certain question. Knowing why the question is asked is the key to knowing the deep meaning behind the question. In many interviews, the abilities and quality of the candidate can only be judged by their response and handling of problems. And then the corresponding decision can be made in combination with the company and the department. For example, HR professional can pay attention to whether the quality and the applied can match the corporate culture, whether they have general abilities and qualities in the workshop, and the potential for further training, while department manager pay more attention to professional skills and department culture. It can be said that human resources are laymen for other functions. So they will not ask the professional question, but department managers are knowledge means the technical counterfeiters are very set to pass this test. And department managers also attach great importance to applicate it is consistent with personal style, because the personal style of the department manager affects the department culture. The interview exercise the students' emergency responsibility and independent thinking ability, helps the cultural and hold their physical stress, and has a certain guidance science fiction for employment. You can increase your confidence by learning from us. When you understand certain amount of knowledge will be more handy for interviews. It's an old saying that knowing yourself and the enemy never end in battle.
Thank you so much for listening today. We hope that you took away some really valuable information, and now you're going to participate in a mock interview with a partner. We're going to give you a series of 5 questions, both from a scholarship interview and internship interview, just so you can get a good sense of answering those questions and how you'll answer them in the future. Again, thank you so much for listening.